Hey, welcome. Hey, welcome back, everybody. It is the Fan Sports Network on a Wednesday morning. The countdown to kickoff is on as we welcome our next guest in, and we're going to get into the T-Birds season. Coach Fitzgerald in his second year at the helm in just a minute, but we bring in one of our Pac-12 insiders. Spencer McLaughlin's joining us now. He does Locked On Pac-12, Locked On Ducks for the Locked On podcast, and he joins us now right here on the Fan. Spencer, good morning. How you doing, Smalls?
Good morning. I am ready for football is the best way I can put my mood on this fine Wednesday.
Absolutely. We have not had you on since the Pac-12 crumbled seemingly overnight in a 24 to 48 hour period. Now that you've had some time to soak it in and evaluate and look at the situation, where do you sit on the whole mess that the Pac-12 has got themselves in today as we're almost to September?
Well, it's pretty crazy because, perceptionally the Pac has indeed crumbled, but legally speaking, Devin, the Pac has not crumbled yet. It's still an entity that has assets like postseason units and an emergency fund and college football playoff revenues and stuff like that. So it's a fascinating situation to see how this all plays out. Now, the most likely outcome here is Stanford and Cal get to the ACC, and then Oregon State and Washington State do something. They've got a number of options that we can talk about. But, at the end of the day, bad management and poor leadership led to the Pac-12's demise. The presidents are the ones who hired Larry Scott, and they deserve, I think 51% of the blame over the years. Larry Scott deserves a lot of it, but, the reports that the presidents turned down a $30 million deal per year for all their content rights to ESPN that would have included a linear component. They might have been able to have Fox be partially involved too. Like they would have been able to get somewhere between 30 and 35 million per school, which is what every team is going to end up making in 2023 and beyond, or 2024 and beyond anyway in their new conference. But they thought they were worth more, and they weren't willing to think about things like unequal revenue sharing for USC and UCLA, and that drove them away. There were a number of other factors too, but it's sad to see the conference dissolve like this because it was very avoidable, but bad management, arrogance, and an over-evaluation of their school's media rights value is what got us into this spot, and it sucks. The conference that I grew up watching and loving and enjoying is going to cease to exist after this year, and it'll be one heck of a final season. But you have to just look at the top and the decisions that were made that ultimately got us in this spot.
Yeah. And Spence, you talk about the leadership being a huge issue. What about the Pac-12 network? The actual on-air product of the Pac-12 network is and has been very good. But the problem with the network is the lack of distribution and accessibility. Like, not a lot of people can watch Pac-12 network games. We were talking about it on the show the other day. Everyone's going around the room trying to figure out who's got Pac-12 network, who doesn't, what TV packages have it. Do you believe that the Pac-12 network is another nail in the coffin for this conference and has been for the last couple years?
Well, I think it's one of the missteps, not being available on DirecTV because of an overplaced priority on getting exposure for Olympic or non-revenue sports was perhaps the biggest singular misstep of the Larry Scott era. He just never really felt like he was a commissioner that wanted to emphasize football. He wanted all the sports to have their say and their exposure and all that sort of stuff. And well-intentioned though that was, it was foolish and misguided. It just was. That's the reality. We all understand how college sports work, except for him. And he was just a stickler on, no, if you're going to take the Pac-12 network, you have to have Pac-12 Oregon and Pac-12 Washington, Pac-12 Bay Area. You have to have all this. And they said, no, we just want the Pac-12 network where the football games are going to be. And they wouldn't budge off of that point. And they were, also not needing to partner with a major network provider, like ESPN or Fox, the way that the other conferences did, because they wanted to be forward-thinking. They wanted to be ahead of the curve. And, it's that kind of ivory tower mentality of, well, we know what's best and we know it's better and we're going to be able to do this and our revenue is going to be great and all this sort of stuff. And they just overvalued themselves time and again. Did you guys see the story about the the way they got to their $50 million baseline for a media rights valuation?
I did not see that. No, I have not seen that storyline.
So what was reported is, ESPN offered that deal I mentioned, $30 million per school per year for all 10, right, including Colorado. This was back in October of 2022. George Kliavkoff presented that deal, and the president said, no, we want $50 million, because apparently there was a professor at one of the 10 remaining schools at the time who did his or her own study, basically, and calculation to say, no, we're worth $50 million. And they went back to ESPN and said, yeah, we want $50 million in school. And ESPN basically said, yeah, that's not going to happen. You can go try and find your own deal. So then it dragged on, and they had the deal with Apple, which, could have maybe been lucrative one day. But you're again, the Apple deal, I see the upside. I think financially it would have been more valuable eventually than the ACC or the Big 12 deal. But the linear exposure clearly matters, because as you guys mentioned, we saw that with the Pac-12 network, and doing a deal exclusively with Apple would have felt like the Pac-12 network all over again, where they're trying to outthink the room, where they think they can just go beyond what everybody else is doing, and they're going to change the game and all this sort of stuff. And, there was a calculated risk involved with that. And I don't think that a lot of schools, and that's why Oregon and Washington jumped, because the Big Ten struck while the iron was hot and the price was low. I don't think a lot of schools were going to be ecstatic. Oregon and Washington clearly weren't, about the idea of, yeah, we're going to try and outthink the room again, because that's what we tried with the Pac-12 network, and it was a full-fledged disaster from an exposure and a revenue standpoint. So just gross mismanagement of the conference is how we've gotten to this point. And, there's still a couple dominoes that we're waiting to have fall, but we should have some resolution by this week or next.
And Spence, just wanted to jump onto the field here now. There's been two teams in the Pac-12 that I'm kind of highlighting. One is the nation's darling. They've kind of become America's team this year. That's Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes in their last season. I was listening to a podcast yesterday with an MGM account executive. He said the most exposure that the books have on any regular season win totals with the Colorado Buffaloes. They have become America's team, like I said. And also USC. We saw them in week 0. I mean, they scored a ton of points, but much like many Lincoln Riley defenses, they gave up a ton of points. Do Caleb Williams and this USC team have a shot at the college football playoff? And then the first question would be, is Colorado legit? Are they going to go over their win total, which I think is 5.5?
Colorado's win total is 5.5 where? And can I bet the under? It's 3.5 on FanDuel.
Oh, FanDuel. Okay. I'm looking at Caesars as of a couple days ago. I thought I saw 4.5, 5, but you're right. I think it looks like 3.5.
I mean, I could see 4.5 being their win total. They've added a sizable amount of talent. The problem is they weren't operating from a roster standpoint with a baseline level of competitiveness. They're basically starting a new college football team. And I don't care how many transfers you bring in, you still can't fix that entirely in one offseason. I mean, that was among the worst Power 5 football teams we've seen since the turn of the century. I mean, you put an 0-12 Kansas team in there. Washington went 0-12. Oregon State went 1-11. Like, that Colorado team is up there. They were so bad. So it's not like, if that transfer portal class came into Arizona State, for instance, that was 3-9 last year, I would think a win total of 5.5 or 6 would be more appropriate. But I think Colorado is the biggest enigma in the Pac-12. I would lean towards betting the under. Their schedule is really hard. I think they'd be able to rack up more wins if their schedule is more favorable, but it is not. It is really, really tough. They start with TCU on the road. They're a 20-point underdog. They've got Nebraska at home, which is a winnable game, but they're an underdog at home there for a reason, probably because Matt Rule is a more proven college coach than Deion Sanders at this point in time. So I also love that you use the word darlings, because depending on who you talk to, they are enemy number one. There are people who don't like Colorado just because of Deion, and I get it. They make themselves a target, and Deion does that deliberately, and that's kind of the point. He kind of has that Donald Trump quality where it's like he knows exactly how to play the media, not necessarily to make everybody like him, but he knows how to get the most attention, and that's what Colorado needed. is, to be relevant, be interesting, be a team that people want to watch, and they're going to be on national TV each of the first 2 weeks on the big noon kickoff, which should be fun. As for USC, not an encouraging sign for the defense in game one against San Jose State. I mean, they walk into your home field and you're only up 7 at the half, and they run for almost 200 yards, and you allow 400 yards of offense. I mean, that's not what USC's defense, I think, is capable of with the talent they have on paper. But then it comes back to Alex Grinch. He's still the defensive coordinator, and he's never, under a Lincoln Riley administration, put together a high-level defense. They don't have to be high-level, but it has been a liability time and time and time again. And this has just been a consistent theme with Lincoln Riley coach teams. They can win the Pac-12. They can get to the playoffs. I think they're more likely to do the first than the second because I just see so many great offenses in the Pac-12. I don't know how they go through their schedule with only one loss, which is what you have to be, one or zero losses and a conference champion. So I don't think the Pac gets to the playoff in the final iteration of this 14 model. I think poetically they miss it because they cannibalize themselves. I don't think USC is immune to that. And look, it was just one game, but it was a pretty bad place to be from, a physicality and run game standpoint. I think USC's defense can improve, but it has to in a pretty sizable way, or else you just can't win that many shootouts. I mean, Utah put up 40 points on them twice last year, and Washington would certainly do the same. Oregon could certainly do the same if that's how their defense is going to look. So they have to improve. They've got some better elements. I mean, Bear Alexander's looked really, really good, but they still have to be better on the back end and schematically because, that they allowed a touchdown to San Jose State in like 39 seconds, and San Jose State went like 50 yards. And you knew they had to throw the ball to try to score. And they allowed a basically wide open, pitch and catch for a touchdown. Like, those are the same issues that USC had last year. If they don't fix that, they won't get to the playoffs.
Spence, just curious on a couple of things with Utah. One, do you think Cam Rising is going to play? Or do you think this is all a ploy just to throw Florida off for tomorrow night's season opener for the Utes? And who do you think will lead the Pac-12 this year in passing? Kind of interesting with all the dynamic quarterbacks that are in the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah, I think you're looking at Caleb Williams or Michael Penix. Penix actually threw for more yards than Caleb Williams a year ago. I have questions about the interior of Washington's offensive line and their ability to protect with a bunch of turnover and not a ton of experience coming in to replace them. I have a couple questions, not doubts, just questions. I think that's an important difference in these sorts of conversations. I doubt that USC's defense is going to be a dominant unit, and I question whether Washington's offensive line will be able to protect Michael Penix like they did a season ago. I mean, they were so gosh darn good at keeping him upright and giving him time and clean pockets, and he just wasn't under pressure very often. So if they do that again, I would lean towards Penix and Washington. Their receiving core is really, really good. But I think Williams is probably, the betting favorite there. But I think it'd be one of those two guys. I don't think Bo Nix and Cam Rising play in pass-heavy enough offenses to get into that conversation. And as for Cam Rising, the reports are that he's going to play. And I expect him to at least try to play. If he gets medically cleared, I mean, everybody listening to this knows Cam Rising is a competitor. Like, he's going to go out and play. He's going to play hard, and if he's going to play hurt if he can. He's not going to let an injury keep him out unless the doctors say, no, you really can't play. But I think the betting line and, what I've heard from people connected to the program reflect the idea that he will play. Whether or not he's at 100%, we won't know until things kick off against Florida tomorrow night. But it should be a really, really fun game. I expect him to play. What I would do, I mean, their schedule just sets up horribly for this. But what I would do if I were Utah is I'd get what I can out of Cam Rising for the first two games, and I would just straight up rest him against Weber State. There's no world in which you should need Cam Rising to win that football game. So I would rest him in week 3 and get him ready for Pac-12 play.
Good stuff. Smalls on Sports here. You can check him out on Twitter at Smalls_55 SUU. Voice of the Thunderbirds, of course. And so we're going to talk SU. Let's turn the page over to that game tomorrow night down there against the Arizona State Sun Devils. We had Coach Fitzgerald on the show, I guess it's been a couple weeks ago now, talking about fall camp. And he says These are money games. They're paying us a lot of money for a reason. They're planning on a win, but we're going to give them what we've got. But we're not supposed to win that game. And well, although I understand that, I do think we could see the T-Birds make enough plays offensively and defensively. This is a 3-9 team last year, new coaching staff. I could see them hanging around and making things interesting, even though everybody assumes that the Sun Devils are going to win that football game. One, are you with that majority of people when these money games? We've seen these upsets before. Could SUU shock the world, I guess, is my opening question about the game.
There are matchups that would be a less likely upset scenario. You don't just have a 3-9 team that, has brought in some talent via the transfer portal for sure, but you don't just have a 3-9 team with a first-time head coach. You have a first-time college football player at quarterback on the other side. Now, Jaden Rashada, 4-star quarterback recruit, had one of the wildest recruitments I've ever seen in college football. That's the silver lining here of hope for Southern Utah, is that if John Kelly, the defense coordinator, who is really, really good, if he can dial up pressures and rattle Jaden Rashada, if they can not let him get comfortable in the early going, then I'm not sure how, Arizona State then will have to rely on the running game. Now, they have a really talented back who, back to the Big Sky days, Southern Utah knows in Cam Scatabo from Sacramento State.
Yeah.
But I think that they are a team that wants to be able to have balance. I mean, Kenny Dillingham last year at Oregon as the offensive coordinator, I saw it as an Oregon fan. He wanted to run the football, but he wanted to take shots down the field too. Like, that was a tenet of his offense. And I don't know how much Jaden Rashada will be able to test the Southern Utah secondary. The good news for the Sun Devils and bad news for the Thunderbirds is he's got the weapons to help him out. You look at Elijah Badger, who was one of the best receivers in the Pac-12 a year ago. Jalen Conyers, one of the top tight end targets, and a big physical presence, a guy who you can just kind of chuck it up to. He looks like someone who should be playing tight end at Stanford. Just big, good hands, and throw up a jump ball and watch him go get it. They brought in Jordan Tyson from Colorado, who is a dynamic playmaker down the field with high-end speed. Guillory's another guy that they can get the ball to and make plays with. So they've got the weapons. The question is, what are they going to have at the quarterback position? And no one is going to know for sure because Jaden Rashada has never taken a college snap. So I think rattling him in his first game, and look, if things really go off the rails, maybe they turn to Trenton Bourguet, who started their games last year after Emory Jones got injured. Maybe they do that, but I think trying to make the true freshman uncomfortable in his first ever college football game is going to be one of the biggest keys for Southern Utah. And they've also got to run the football too. You can't rely on Justin Miller to go for 300 yards in this game. The numbers against the Power 5 schools the last couple of years have not been good. So if Southern Utah is going to move the football, they've got to be able to involve Braden Whistler on the ground.
Yeah, that would be huge. And they got a couple other backs other than Whistler as well. But can they get the deep shots? Can they get Isaiah Wooden in open space? That'll be another factor because he might be as fast as anybody on that field, Spencer.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's a take the top off sort of guy, and he's their gadget guy too. I mean, you'll see him get the ball on screens, handoffs, fly sweeps. I mean, everything really. The object is get Isaiah Wooden the football, let him do the rest. And I'm sure that Arizona State defensive coordinator Brian Ward, who comes down from Washington State and I think is a really good hire from Kenny Dillingham, I'm sure he's well aware of that Wooden is going to be a top target. So it'll be a test for new Thunderbirds OC Ty Hyatt, who was on Delane Fitzgerald's staff back at Frostburg State years ago. It'll be a test for those two coaches who are both offensive guys, and to get Isaiah Wooden the ball when he's going to attract all the attention. I think an Ethan Bolingbrook, a Tim Patrick have to be able to play complementary roles, maybe even more than complementary roles. I like the way Tim Patrick came on at the end of last season, so I think there are some solid options there. But I think Wooden's the only guy who I'd say they'd be able to take a deep shot to, and he could get behind the secondary because he's got as explosive of speed as you will find at the FCS level in college football.
And Spence, you look at the week 2 opponent September 9th for Arizona State. That's going to be the Oklahoma State Cowboys come to Tempe. Is there any chance that you think Arizona State overlooks the T-Birds in this game?
I think that's what Southern Utah is hoping for, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I mean, you're dealing with college kids, and there are a lot of players on there who have gone up against FCS teams before. There are even, including Trenton Bourget, a couple players who have gone up against Southern Utah before. And in 2021, the final score was 41-14, and I think that's the best case scenario for Southern Utah is ASU kind of overlooks them, takes them lightly, and then Thunderbirds come out ready to go and try and punch them in the mouth a little bit, and kind of wake them up and surprise them. But with ASU's self-imposed bowl ban, I don't know if that's going to happen, because now every game is kind of magnetized for ASU as an opportunity to go out and play. It's first game of the year. Everyone's been waiting for football for so long. I wouldn't bank on that mindset coming into play, but again, you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids. They're kids, and the look-ahead factor has taken place on more than one occasion in college sports and college football over the years. So, I'm not coming on here and predicting an upset or anything like that, but there are matchups in the Pac-12 that I would look at and say, yeah, there's no chance Southern Utah is gonna shock the world here, right? If they were playing at USC and Oregon or Washington and Oregon State, I'd say, yeah, I'm not seeing that. But you look at ASU and you say, okay, it's still going to be hard. It's still going to be a challenge, but is the likelihood as low as what it would be against some other Power 5 matchups? No, I don't think so. I think it's between the new coach, the season they had last year, and the true freshman quarterback, you have some things working in Southern Utah's favor. But make no mistake about it, it'll come down to the guys in the trenches on both sides of the ball. That's where these games can get out of hand, is when the Power 5 teams can just hand the ball off for 7-8 yards of carry, and there's nothing that a lower level opponent at the FCS level can do about it. That's where these things can get really, really tricky. So that's where Southern Utah's got to try and hold firm as best they can.
Yeah, and that's going to be kind of interesting because they have shored that up. You got a really good linebacker in Aubrey Nellums who could have a big season for the T-Birds, and then they brought in the transfer Robert Horsey from Frostburg State.
Yeah.
And
don't sleep on Connor Colborne, reigning freshman All-American at the FCS level. I think he and Nellums make up one of the best linebacker tandems certainly in the United Athletic Conference, but maybe in all of FCS college football. They are a dynamic pair, and they are a playmaking pair.
Love it. Spencer McLaughlin breaking down the Pac-12, getting you ready for some football, baby. Also breaking down the SUU at Arizona State game. And, of course, SUU goes to BYU in week 2. 2 money games on the docket. If Coach Fitzgerald can get to 2-2 or 2-3 going into October, he'll be in pretty good shape, Spence, and this will be a pretty good football team.
Yeah, that would be outstanding. I don't think anyone's expecting him to win on Thursday or next Saturday up in Provo. Those will be tough battles to be sure. But then you got to play a really good FCS opponent in UC Davis on the road. So first 3 weeks for the Thunderbirds, they'll be all over the country: Tempe, Provo, and then UC Davis. So it'll be a real show me what you're made of start to the season for Southern Utah, and I don't think there's a better guy that could have a quarterback for that sort of stretch than Justin Miller.
Now we'll be watching him closely. Spence, have a great trip, great call on the game tomorrow night. Thanks for the time on the show. Spencer McLaughlin, everybody. We got to take a timeout. When we come back, we'll get you ready for the day of sports on the Fan Sports Network. It's The Drive. Don't touch that dial.